Well, there's my campsite behind me. Gwen and I are in the wilderness in the Australian bush, and I thought I'd bring to you now another Overland Workshop. I haven't done one in a while. And I'm going to talk about the game-changing moments in four-wheel drive and overland. And when I talk about game-changing, I'm talking about significant events that have taken place that have changed the way we do things and the way we equip our vehicles. But I'm not going to be alone talking. I'm going to then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my presentation, and then I'm going to show it to Paul Marsh, obviously a big favourite of the channel, and probably the most experienced overlander I know, and my good friend Jeramey James, who has done overlanding travelling in North America, Australia, Africa, and not only four-wheel drives but also motorcycles. So he has a lot to bring to the party. The subject, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do my presentation, then show it to them, and then edit in their reactions to me. We could have a discussion together on Zoom or something like that, but I'm going to try this as we did one not long ago, and the video quality wasn't particularly good, and I broadcast it as a podcast. If you look in the description, you'll see a link to my podcast channel as well. And that was the three of us all talking together. Can't remember the subject, actually. What was it? Doesn't really matter. But now I want to talk about one of the game changers in overlanding and four-wheel drive, and that is lithium batteries. Are they really worth it? Are they really worth the money? And how they change things. I'm St Pierre White. Join me as I share my passion for building four-wheel drive trucks and travelling to the remotest parts of the world. From my point of view, in the early days, our auxiliary battery was a car battery, a high cyclic car battery. And if you deep cycle them, drain them a lot, they won't last very long. If you do it, a lot, 1 year, and the battery's finished. It sulfates up in the recharging process, and they're not designed to be deep discharged. They're designed for shallow charge. So discharge, charge, discharge, charge, and that's what they love. That fantastic at delivering current. Okay, quite good at accepting current too. Then came the deep cycle battery, and everybody started talking about, oh, you've got to have deep cycle. Why? Well, because the deep cycle is designed not to sulfate as much. The technology is very similar, and would then be able to take a discharge and then a recharge happily, and therefore would last longer. They had, and remain to this day, have a major disadvantage in that deep cycle batteries of the standard lead acid type are reluctant to accept current. And until the DC to DC charger technology was available, getting the charge back into that battery was a problem, because if you just linked it directly to the start battery via even just a cable or a solenoid, there would always be a voltage drop. Now, solenoids never work particularly well because of the voltage drop. The more connections you have between your start battery and your charge battery, the higher the voltage drop, therefore the less efficient the charging will be. And that was a problem. You'd go on a drive with a half flat battery because you've been at camp and you're running your lights the night before and your fridge has been running, and you'd go on a 2-hour drive somewhere and you'd think the battery would be charged, and then it wouldn't be charged because of the voltage drop. And so in that situation, those batteries never, ever, ever got 100% charge, ever. So they coped with a lesser charge. All right. And then along came AGM. And AGM batteries was a new technology, but it was their deep cycle. They're happy to take a deep discharge, but they suffer the same thing. The thing is with AGM, they're more efficient at delivering the current. they last longer than a standard deep cycle lead acid, okay, because they sulfate even less, and being lead acid, they're very heavy, but similar to start batteries and deep cycle lead acid batteries. So they're an improvement, but not a big difference between a standard deep cycle lead acid and an AGM. Yes, they are better. There's no question about them being better. They're better at accepting current, and they're better at delivering current. These batteries are very good at delivering current. You can run winches off them, you can run compressors off them with no problem at all. They're very good at delivering current. But accepting a charge, not very good. And when DC-DC came along, the DC-DC took care of that voltage drop issue because it measured the battery, second battery, independent of the start battery, and increased the voltage so there would be no voltage drop. And in fact, they've gone so far, DC to DC controllers have gone so far now as to you actually can select what kind of battery. Some will automatically know, they're intelligent, what kind of battery you have fitted, or others have different cables. That's one for lithium, and that color's for AGM, etc., and you just wire it up, and the system knows how to handle the voltage, because the charging profile, how the current is accepted by that battery, is different according to the different kind of battery it is.
Good morning, and welcome back to our Overland Workshops that Andrew hosts, and it's really always a great pleasure to be part of, I guess, sharing knowledge and information and experience, and I think that's what we all like to do, and that's certainly where I feel we all benefit from what we can share with one another. So let's look at batteries, and this is a topic which has come up for many people. I'm no expert on batteries, but certainly in the market these days, lithium batteries has shown itself to be a strong contender for the solution to how we build our vehicles and manage our auxiliary power. I think from years gone past, we've used deep cycle batteries, AGM batteries of different types, mostly with a solenoid connecting them through to from the main battery to the auxiliary battery, giving power from the alternator to charge it. And of course, alternators have improved, vehicle technology has improved, batteries have certainly improved in a big way, and we are left with, I guess, a lot more choice. And choice leads to more questions that need to be asked. For me, it's really about understanding, what do people actually want from their dual battery management system? And actually, how are they going to use it? So are you a person who's going to travel and be frequently stopping for a night here and a night there, and you've got the benefit of the alternator charging your battery, probably a lot less power consumed from the battery by your fridge and auxiliaries? Or are you a person who's actually going to want to go to a place and stop off and just be there for a few days? Because that's when it really comes into play, how you manage your system, how you balance it out. And I always use the analogy of a water tank, and I feel a water tank is like your battery. You fill it up from different means and you drain it off. And basically we do the same with the battery. We top it up using an alternator, or we use a mains charger, 220 volts, or we use solar power. And we tap off the power we need to run our fridges, our electrics, our inverters and all that. How big a battery that we have, how much power we can take off the battery, that's really what the question's got to be asked. So how much power do you need from your battery? In other words, how big a tank do you need to allow you to use your camp power efficiently without having to go and start your car, drive it? How much of a budget are you looking at spending on a system? Because this all relates hand in hand to what you want. We can have the Rolls Royce of what we want, but there's a price tag attached. So I think it's really an important discussion for people to understand there's a balance. There's a balance in how often you use your vehicle. with regards to having a battery management system. If you're a person who uses it weekly, maybe every couple of weeks, or maybe 2-3 times a year, do you need to make an investment in a very expensive battery that over time does degrade? So it's a budget concern. That's a big question to look at. For many aspects of how you look at something, the longer you have it and the more you use it, often works out cheaper to pay up front for something more expensive. We've heard the old analogy, buy once, buy proper and buy good and spend your money, or buy cheap and buy twice. Now, that isn't always true. I think sometimes, you can look at something like a solenoid system. It's not perfect. It's got definite disadvantages. But if you understand those disadvantages and you work within the realms of that, and you work within the realms of batteries, an AGM battery, or you're going to look at newer technology, lithium batteries, then you can make a decision. And I think that's where it needs to start. What is right for you? Not what the person wants to sell you, because that's where they're going to make the best profit. So when we're looking at the two types of systems available, batteries, let's talk batteries, we're looking at AGM batteries for the management of our auxiliary power. It's time-tested technology. They've been around a long time. They're manufacturers who make these batteries, and they really are well tested, well made, and some really good quality batteries out there. As technology's moved in and we've seen the lithium batteries come in, they've given us a distinct advantage in some areas which we couldn't achieve with the AGM batteries. So you're getting a battery that is certainly a lot lighter. You need less battery space or tank size, if we want to put it like that, to achieve the same amount of power. So there's a big advantage. When you're building a vehicle, the last place I want to put my batteries is in the engine bay. To me, you can never always get the size of battery you want, and heat is a big disadvantage. And also you're running cables from the battery in the engine bay to everything at the back of the car. So it's far better to get the weight to the middle of the car. Put your batteries in a place that is accessible, the cable runs are much shorter, and you can actually look at what power you need. So when you look at your system, and I'm no expert, there's some very well qualified people to give us really good advice on this subject. But I've always found that if you understand the balance of how you're going to use it, how much power needs to come into the battery, for the amount of power you're going to take out of the battery, then you're going to look at a solution that's going to fit your needs and of course your budget. And there's going to be a compromise. Compromise is either you're going to spend more money to get what you want, or you're going to actually live with a bit of a compromise and you're going to go cheaper on the price on your wallet. And it's expensive to put a vehicle together. So sometimes, with some of my clients, I've actually said, start off with something simpler, more cost effective, and grow into something a bit more expensive as you need it. If you're building a vehicle to go overland for a year or longer, you could actually make that investment and say, the return on my investment, the return of, let's say, the battery cycle, lithium compared to AGM, is more efficient and more valuable by having a lithium battery. You're saving the weight, but you've got an upfront cost, and that's something to consider. You've also got to look at where are you going to be traveling. Are you going to be traveling into really cold conditions, -degrees? Because that's one of the downfalls of a lithium battery. You've got to manage the battery temperature. It can be managed, but you've got to be aware that that's an important factor. So, I look at it and think to myself, what do I want in my vehicle? How am I going to use my vehicle? And how am I spending my money when I look at the overall budget? Because it's very easy to go down a road where you're listening to someone who says, you have to have this because it's the best. But do you need the best? And is the best going to serve your needs? And I think that when we're looking at the options of the direct comparisons, yes, your AGM battery you're going to pull down to 50%. So it's like your water tank. You've got 50% capacity you can use. A lithium's going to give you 80 to 90%. So quickly you can see how much value that is. Less space, less of a size battery to give you the same output and power. So it is definitely technology to embrace, Costs are going to come down. There is an expensive cost on buying a lithium battery, but we've seen technology over the years, and technology comes in, it proves itself, it refines itself, and then the price adjusts. And soon enough, batteries, which are always on the sort of improvement of how much better they can make battery technology, how much more efficient they can be, are going to be something that we will just embrace as something and go, well, why wouldn't you fit lithium? But right now, I still think there are factors to consider. In my opinion, I think when I speak to my clients and we advise what is going to be the options, we need to put everything on the table. And I think it's really important, as I said earlier, to understand the value of what you're paying for versus how you're going to use it. Because you can spend a lot of money up front and it sits really nicely in your vehicle and you hardly ever use it. Is it good value? Well, it's good value if you use it often and you use it long enough, and over time it will give you value, but how much of a return are you getting on your investment? So I think that's for me one of the key factors. I embrace the technology. I love the fact we're moving forward. I love the collaboration and how we all can share ideas and thoughts and new ways of doing things. At the end of the day, we all share the same passion. We want to get out into the bush, have fun, really take ourselves to remote places where we can be off the grid with less distractions, more time to connect with ourselves through nature. So enjoy, have fun, and I'm quite sure that a combination of experience and knowledge is going to help you make a good decision. All the best.
But why do I think that lithium is a game changer? In the past, we had to spend so much of our time aware of our current usage. How was the fridge doing? What was the voltage at the end of the day? Did we have to go on a drive to recharge the battery? And I mean, we would only use the battery for charging our laptops or camera batteries, lighting, and a fridge. Nothing else. We didn't think about anything else. But now with lithium, because it's so easy to charge, and because it's so efficient, given now that a 100 amp battery, instead of only being able to deliver 60 of those 100 amps, well, useful current anyway, it can now deliver 99 of those 100 amps. So now suddenly we have all this extra current at our disposal. And what do we do with it? Well, for me, we had a dinner last night and we made toast on the kitchen toaster. 83 amps dropped to 70 amps over the course of probably a minute and a half, and we had 2 nice pieces of toast. We could do it, no problem at all. I did leave my kitchen kettle at home. I've decided that in fact boiling water around the camp with a kitchen kettle was even too much for me to cope with at this time, but we could do it. It would use 240 amps for approximately 2 minutes to boil 2 cups of water. That to me is taking things a little bit too far, but it's possible. People are now using induction cooking. So if you're now going induction cooking, you have to now think about, well, big battery banks. We've got 150 amp per hour lithium in the camper. We could do it with 150, but we might want to put 300 in there. When does it stop? When does it end? But I believe it's a game changer because now we can relax when it comes to current, because the batteries are so much more efficient, the way of charging them is so much more efficient, and as long as we understand that there are limitations with lithium, it's fantastic. And the limitations really are the limit on how much current it can actually output. In other words, these particular batteries can deliver 175 amps. I think it can deliver 200 for a very short time, but if you over discharge the battery, it will overheat the battery and the internal battery management system will turn it off, protecting the battery. So as long as we understand those shortcomings that are few, particularly for vehicles like this and overlanding and travel, as long as we understand those shortcomings, to me, it's a complete game changer. And Jeramey, he's doing a very interesting project now, and I've asked him to to share that with us, and I'm hoping to actually make a video on the channel for it. But he's building an overlander, but it's based on a boat, but it's an adventure boat. It's for long distance exploration in the Pacific Northwest, in the lakes and tidal areas of the Pacific Northwest. And he calls it his adventure boat. And again, the electrical system, Jeramey, look forward to hearing your take on it.
I'm at Lake Powell. It's October. It's gorgeous here. I'm sitting in the sun. It's pretty warm with the lake behind us in one of these canyons, and I couldn't think of a better time to talk about what you asked me about batteries. Coming into Lake Powell, I was not familiar with this area, and now that I've been here for a few days, it is obvious that distance is not what I expected, and you get to travel and explore places. It's just, if you've not done it, hard to explain. Absolutely unbelievable. But what's amazing is that with the confidence you get with understanding that the kit you have is going to work. And I think that at the beginning of the conversation about power and overland travel or marine travel in this case, it's really, really the principles are the same. At the end of that, you want your stuff to work, and you're going to be back into places that are, frankly, we couldn't get out of here in hours and hours and hours, maybe a half a day by swimming, because there is absolutely no path. These are only accessible by boat. There's no way to get out of this canyon, and we're 20 miles off the main branch of the lake. Understanding that your power supply is going to work and that your machine is going to work is absolutely paramount. I think I have to blame you for not telling me more about DC power and the rest of my life, even before I met you. Somehow that's your fault. But the idea that today I can not only have a battery that I can carry around with me that will power my entire boat for a day and a half, 2 days, with my current load, but the minute I turn the motor on and the alternator inside of my outboard Honda motor on the boat that's behind me starts to put as much power first into the motor cranking battery, but after that's full, which it almost always is, it puts every bit of power back into my LiFePO battery. I have a lithium iron phosphate battery, LiFePO4 battery from Battleborn. It's a 100 amp hour LiFePO battery. The minute I turn my motor on, it starts throwing power, amperage, current back into that LiFePO battery. I hear all the time about people saying, how long will it last? But I think I hear a lot less often, how long does it take to charge? If I have to spend 8 hours putting all the battery power I kind of took out of my battery overnight when I wasn't steaming around, well, I don't have 8 hours. I don't want to run my fuel. I don't have fuel for 8 hours to just, charge it back up. It's not like I have a generator laying around. You could do, but it kind of defeats the purpose of being out in the outdoors and enjoying, this. So that's what's starting my Honda motor. I have two. I have a Honda 150, and I also have a Honda kicker motor, a 9.9 horse kicker motor. They start off that battery. Between that battery and my LiFePO 100 amp hour Battleborn battery is a Red Arc brand, what's called a BCDC 1225. It is a DC to DC charger. In other words, it actually is plugged into the main cranking battery. It's then plugged into the LiFePO battery and acts as the bridge between those two for charging. It also acts as an isolator. And when the power from the motor's alternator fills up the crank start battery, just because that's all it does, it just literally just starts the motors, it runs no electronics, it does nothing. When it fills that up, the DC to DC charger says, I'm going to give the rest of the power to the LiFePO battery. And it does. And the LiFePO battery's nature, its chemical nature, is that it will take power as fast as you can give it to it, relatively. I know that there are engineers with upper ends of the math on what it'll take. For my intents and my purposes, I can't generate more power than what that battery will take, and it does it phenomenally. One of the big requirements is that I want to take my wife out on Puget Sound, and we want to look for wildlife. That is actually what the boat's for. So first off, I want enough power to sleep for up to 2 days in one camp spot without starting the boat. That was actually number one thing. In other words, I don't want to have to recharge the boat and still have enough power to spare. I can do that a number of ways. One of those is put solar. I have not added solar to this boat yet, but I'll tell you, solar is absolutely on the plan. And the charger that I have by Red Arc, the 1225D, does take solar. I just haven't fitted the panels. I'm going to. Secondly, I want the ability to power my CPAP. I sleep with a CPAP. I have for years. I have sleep apnea. I'm going on 19 years. I've not slept more than a handful of nights in all those years without a CPAP. Originally, it stopped me from traveling and going outdoors and doing a lot of overlanding because I didn't know how to deal with that. I could have, now that I know, Andrew, you've helped, I could have taken a deep cycle battery with me everywhere I went and plopped it on the ground, put some alligator clips on it, and off I went. I could have done that. Charging it up would have been challenging, and I think for years I didn't understand that too, and it prohibited me from doing that kind of travel. But I'll tell you that with a LiPo battery and able to do that, I can run my CPAP. I have a Snowmaster 40-liter fridge running all the time. It is wired directly to that 100 amp, fuses and all the things that are safety, of course, but it's not switched. In other words, when I turn the boat off and all the electronics off, the refrigerator stays running. I have 3 Raymarine Axiom 9 Plus MFDs, multifunction displays. So I have charts in real time, GPS, all that is happening on my main chart device. My third device is my sounder. So my third device is actually looking at all my transducer data to give me fish finder, depth, underwater structure, etc. So for fishing and or just safety, it's an amazing tool to have, and with no fishing boat would be complete without it. Those are all running on that. I have LED cabin lights. I have LED cockpit lights. I have secondary reading lights in the helm. I have, again, I already mentioned some of the 12-volt outlets. I have 6 USB charging that are all 2.1 amp charging ports for USB. They're actually they're type A. We're going to add some type C as well to the boat. I have a Fusion audio system with a 1600 watt Fusion amp with 4 JL audio speakers, 2 7.5s or 7.7s, and then 2 6.5s on the boat as well. I have navigation lights, obviously. I have an anchor light. I have 2 horns. I have 2 radios, a Garmin AIS radio, and I have a secondary kind of a backup radio that was in the boat when I bought it. It was an ICOM non-AIS radio. Both of those are running at all times. They usually sit on 2 different channels so that if I'm in the sound, I can monitor communications. So all those things are not all running all the time, but when I'm steaming, many of those are all basically on and they're available for use. At any given point, I'm drawing between 3 and about 9 amp. And at idle, with my CPAP and when the fridge is already up to cool and it's not kicking on, I'm actually under an amp in the evening, which obviously gives me a huge amount of duration on the battery. All of those things are on the boat. When we looked at how we were going to build this, I wanted nothing that would touch the starter batteries, in other words, the motor batteries for get home. I wanted nothing in the electronics of the boat to be touching those physically, directly connected, so I never had to worry about a dead battery. So LiPo gives me that ability. So we built that with that in mind, with the ability to run everything in mind, and most importantly, the ability to put all that power back in the battery quickly, no matter where we were, especially if we didn't have the fuel or the time to run for hours and hours and hours just to get the alternator to fill the battery back up. So obviously solar is definitely on the roadmap. I want to be able to do that because it's a phenomenal, it's just obvious, clear way to put power back into the battery. The Red Arc is the key to that. It is amazing how well it works. The LiPo profile is phenomenal. I've had 0 issues with it. It could not be simpler to set up. And then understanding fusible links in the boat and everything else, and understanding, wire gauging, understanding marine wire, very, very important. And I'll tell you, the guy that really has taken me to school on that is a guy named Jeff Cote from Pacific Yacht Systems. Look him up on YouTube. He's phenomenal. You want to understand a lot of nuance in battery technology. Listen to Jeff talk. Obviously, Andrew, you've talked about this all the time. It's fantastic teaching. Paul Marsh does a great job at this. Also, Will Prowse is a YouTube guy. You've got to go check out if you really want to see some battery teardowns and understand why they're different. But I'll tell you, traditionally, this is where the joke I kind of open with, right? Why didn't I know all this before, Andrew? Why didn't you teach me all this early on, years ago? Here's the thing. A lead-acid battery does not give you all the power before it becomes a kind of a brick. It doesn't work after a certain point. You get about 50% of the hours. The challenge with the deep cycle lead-acid battery isn't as much as that you don't get as many hours, so why not just buy 2? Okay, so you have weight, but you have 2, you can get the hours. The issue is it doesn't take power very fast. So you've got to spend a long time to get all your battery back. LiPo doesn't need that. So I would tell anyone, I don't care if it's a small boat and you're going to go out fishing for the day on a lake, if you're an offshore fisherman and you want to look at really having safety in mind. So I'm going to add radar to this boat. I've got the MFDs that are on there. I want to be able to be safe in any weather, especially fog. If you guys are from the coast, you know about fog. Even the Great Lakes region, you know about fog. I want to be able there. I want to be able to be safe. I want the power to run my gear, even if I'm not steaming, full speed back. And I need that power to be there all the time. I don't want to worry about whether or not my gear, my sounder, right, my depth gauge, my train, all that's going to work. It's got to work all the time. And if you're the kind of person that's on Lake Powell and you're water skiing, and that's the extent, that's fine. I'll tell you, running a sound system will drain your battery, as you both know. The last thing you want to do is have a really good party, spend all day wakeboarding, have a great sound system, and then not be able to start your boat. A LiPo battery is a non-trivial investment. I mean, a Battle-Born 100 amp hour battery is going to run you $1,000, right at $1,000. But the ability to separate that from starting your motor, right? I'd much rather be able to get back home and not have a sound system, right, than have a great sound system and not be able to get back home. Separating that battery from your starting battery is the key, and LiPo allows you to do that. So for me, that's the story. That's some of the reasons why. It's some of the use case. I think it's been a game changer for overland travel. It allows me to come to beautiful places like this on my boat and to run around these canyons with full confidence that I'm going to be able to get back home and that it's not going to be broken. So that's LiPo for me in overlanding. That's adapting it to a boat. I know I'm talking in concept here, but the principles, as you know, they all apply. So I hope that's valuable. I want to know what your next challenge is, because what else are we talking about? Batteries are one of my favorites. Yeah, hit me up with another question, and I want to hear what Paul has to say too. So let me get into that.